What's up, everybody? Welcome back to PhillyCheese Gaming. My name is Philip, but you can call me Philly Cheese. Today I've got some quick beginner tips for the Division. I've been playing it through the weekend, and there are a couple of things that I have learned during my time with the Division that I kind of wish I had known when I very first started. So I figure a lot of people are going to be just jumping into the game, and here's a couple of tips that'll help you get a good start. So my first tip is going to be to use the cover system. Now I know what you're thinking, Philly Cheese, it's a cover-based shooter. Obviously I'm going to use the cover system, but I mean you need to use the cover system right. It works a little bit differently than cover systems in games like Gears of War or even Ghost Recon. So you're going to have to kind of practice it a little bit. It's also very important that you go into your options in your control settings and turn off move to exit and turn on button press to corner. These two options are going to give you a lot more control over your character when you're in cover. It'll have you exiting cover a lot less randomly. If you try to look away without these options on, you're going to just pop up out of cover automatically, or you'll end up trying to peek around a corner and you'll end up scooting around the corner and getting yourself shot in the buttocks. And there's no free ice cream in the Division. The next tip with cover is going to be don't zone in with your scope. This is something that I have a tendency to do as more of a first-person shooter player. So you really need to be conscious of the enemies that are around you while you're zooming in and pounding the heck out of one guy with your rifle. His buddies are probably moving up alongside you. So you just need to be aware of what's going on at all times. Next is going to be to use cover rolls. This is pretty simple. When you're sprinting towards cover, you can double tap A to initiate a roll and then tap A again at the end of that to snap into cover. This just gives you one more bit of unpredictable movement before you hit cover and can help you cross longer gaps without getting shot. Also, I'm going to recommend that you use the cover sprint whenever possible. This is achieved by being in cover, looking at another piece of cover until the little A icon pops up, and then you hold A to sprint to the next area. You can couple this with the cover roll. At the end, you let go of A, double tap to roll, tap A again to dive into cover, and this is the best way to move from one spot to the next. If you just manually sprint, you're not going to have your head down like you do if you use a cover move, so I definitely recommend the cover moves. My next set of tips is going to be about the mini-map, because this was something that really threw me for a loop at first. So there are going to be red pulses around the edges of the map. These are going to indicate enemy presence. If you see a red zone, this is a contaminated zone. It's not like an area full of enemies that are running towards you to kill you. This is something that really threw me off. I got engaged in a battle with a contaminated zone behind me and the enemies in front of me, and I kept whipping around to the contaminated zone because it's this big red splotch on my map. I wish they could use a different color, but you know, whatever. Also on that note, red X's, that's just where you previously died. It's not like a boss enemy coming to, you know, kill you and take all of your things. If you see a white square on the mini-map, this indicates searchable objects. A lot of times if you see one and you get into that area, a whole bunch of other ones will appear around it. So these are definitely worth checking out. These are how you get those consumables that you can give to civilians, and they'll give you experience and items in return. And finally, there's going to be a lot of objective icons on your map at one time, even if you have something selected as your mission. But if you look at the text objective reminder up next to your map, it's actually going to draw a thin dotted line to the correct icon. This can help kind of keep you on the right track when you're navigating the map. Alright, my next tip is going to be to save your money until you unlock the base of operations, and maybe even a little bit past that until you've knocked out a couple of the story missions. I did not really realize that the starting area of the game is entirely tutorial. There's vendors there, there's side missions there, so I did a couple side missions and then sold all my loot to buy, I think it was a police M4 that, you know, 10 minutes later when I get to the main game, there's so many more weapon options, you know, so many better options as far as damage and things like that, and just variety of weapons. And I felt pretty dumb that I had just dumped all my cash into something that was kind of worthless. So definitely want to save your money until you unlock the base of operations. And my final tip also has to do with the weapon loot, and it's regarding the DPS statistic. This is something I kind of had to do a little research into because, as I mentioned in my first impressions video, I don't speak MMO. I'm not fluent in MMO. DPS doesn't really mean much to me. And from what I found out, that's kind of a good thing. The DPS number can be very deceptive. Just because something has a higher DPS stat does not necessarily mean it's going to be a more effective weapon. That DPS stat is a combination of the actual damage, the magazine size, the reload size, accuracy, stability, all that kind of stuff. And it's all math. I don't really understand how it all works, but what I've figured out is that sometimes a weapon with a lower DPS can be a lot more deadly. So you really need to look at your individual damage and your magazine and your rate of fire and weigh those versus your individual play style and test out different weapons. Find out what works for you and use that and rank up that weapon. Find that weapon type with higher damage stats and give it better mods. Don't necessarily worry about a DPS on something else being higher because it may not be a better weapon for you. That's all for now, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure and leave a like if you learned something. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more Division content and a very special Fallout 4 build coming to you soon. This is Philip for PhillyCheese Gaming, signing out.